Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Advanced Hebrew. So this is the class that will follow Intermediate Hebrew. So recommend going through Intermediate Hebrew first before taking this one. And if you don't know the alphabet, beginning Hebrew before taking that. All of those past classes you can find on YouTube at the Passion For Truth video channel. So go there and check those out if you haven't already. The classes for Advanced are not yet posted on YouTube because I'm starting them today. So if I had a time machine, I'd go ahead and go forward in time and post those now. But that would probably create some kind of a paradox, so I won't do that. Anyway, back onto Hebrew. The notes for this class you can find at theregathering.com/page/PFT Hebrew 3. Okay, beginning is 1, intermediate's 2, advanced is 3. So we are on week 1 of Advanced Hebrew. Don't let the term Advanced Hebrew scare you. It's really just an extension of Intermediate Hebrew. But by the time we're through with this class, our next phase after Advanced Hebrew will be laying the groundwork to be able to actually interpret a few scriptures. So that is my goal for the next class, is to start digging into some things and parsing out some verses. So you won't know every single thing you need to know to translate the entire Bible, because I don't know all those things either. So it's kind of hard for me to teach them, but especially in the time that I have. But we'll be able to go through some basic things, and you'll be able to actually read a few verses. And the continuing study from there will be what expands your field of interpretation. So, but anyway, we're still laying the groundwork, so here we go. All right, in Intermediate Hebrew, we talked about nouns, adjectives, prepositions, and pronouns, and we talked just a little bit about verbs. And in Advanced, we're going to focus in a lot closer on verbs. They're really a subject all their own, and we're not going to cover them exhaustively, but we're going to at least get some of the basics down so that you have a good overview of how verbs function. Okay, verbs are really the core of the Hebrew language. Hebrew is said to be a very concrete language, a very active language, a language of doing. And that's very much true because the verb is the most prevalent part of speech in Hebrew by far. And verbs in Hebrew serve many functions. The Hebrew word for verb is poal. And for some reason, I have a bad feeling that I misspelled this in the notes. I did, in fact, misspell that in the notes. Poal is spelled Pe, Vav, Ayin, Lamed. Okay, not Aleph, it is an Ayin. So correct that in your notes. I will correct that on mine as well. That was a sleep-deprived error on my part. But yes, poal, and it's very important that you spell this right because that is very key later on. But anyway, poal is the Hebrew word for verb, and a poal is a doer. Okay? So noun is shem etzem, which means name of essence. An adjective is toar, which means a describer. Poal is a doer. And in fact, a verb is referred to as an action word. It's a word that describes an action. In a dictionary, or on our vocabulary lists, poal is abbreviated as just a small pe. So if you see a word in a dictionary or a vocabulary list with a small pe on it, it means that that word is in fact a verb. Most verbs in Hebrew, I would say all, but there are a couple of exceptions. Most verbs in Hebrew are reducible to 3-letter root words. Not so much that they are reducible to that as they are derived from three-letter root words. So this word poal that I just described, okay, poal is a noun that means a verb, okay, but it derives from a three-letter root, pe, ayin, lamed, okay, no vowels, okay, the roots have no particular vowels attached to them, they're just three letters. And the base meaning of this root is to act or to do. Okay. And from this, we can construct verbs that mean all sorts of variations of to act or to do. Now, what do I mean by variations? Well, a verb can have a tense, it can be past tense, it can be future tense. There are also a number of other kinds of tenses. A verb can be active or it can be passive. A verb can be singular or it can be plural. It can be masculine or feminine. It can be said in the first person, the second person, or the third person. There are lots of different ways to subtly change the meaning of a verb, but when you go back to the root, it has the same root for related verbs. So, for example, take the root kaf, tav, beit. And I have this listed in your vocabulary list as well. Kaf, tav, beit as a root means to write. And that's what I was going to mention too, is that when you see a verb in a dictionary or a vocabulary list, it will always be written as its root. Okay, you will not find a verb in a dictionary that's third person, future tense, feminine. You won't find every possibility. The dictionaries would be this thick if you did. And it's also worth noting that if you look up things in a Strong's Concordance, this is also how verb roots are listed. Verbs are listed by their root, not by the full word. I mentioned this with nouns in the Strong's as well. Nouns you'll find just as the base noun. You won't find a noun with prefixes or suffixes added to it because, again, if you did every possible iteration, the Strong's Concordance would be this thick and would not be very convenient, actually, at that point. So, yes, verbs are listed by their root. Okay, so kaf, tav, beit is a root that means to write.
Tav means to write?
Yeah, just the root itself. Now, several possible iterations of this, and we're going to, as we move along, we'll see why these are the iterations that they are. If we take this root and we add some vowels to it, okay, so comments here and a patach here making katav, okay. If we,
with a V Victor?
Yes, katav. Okay. This has the same base meaning to write. Okay, but this word is, and get ready for this long list, it is in the third person, it is masculine, it is singular, and it is in the past tense. Okay? So, what this verb means, what katav means, is third person masculine equates to he. Okay? It's the third person and it's masculine, so it's he and not she. Oh, yeah, third person masculine singular, I should say, equates to he. Yes, right. Me, first person. Yeah, I is first person, you second person, he is third person. Okay? All right, and past tense of write is wrote. Okay, so katav means he wrote. Okay? So if you just saw the word katav on its own, this is how it would be translated. Now, frequently in translation, you won't translate the he because the he is replaced by the subject of the sentence. This third person masculine singular tells you what the subject that's attached to this verb has to be. You can only use katav if the subject is in the third person, masculine, and singular. So, if we were to speak of a man, Adam, okay, we're speaking of Adam, not to Adam, so it's third person. And we wish to say Adam wrote, okay, Adam katav. And of course, because word order is flexible, we could also say katav Adam. Okay, all of those would mean Adam wrote. Okay, and I'm going to go through the entire past tense at some point, but I just want to show that this is how verb conjugation functions. You have to match the gender, the number of the verb to the subject, and then you have to use the correct person if you're speaking of yourself, to somebody, or of somebody else. And you have to use the correct tense. Okay, this is past tense. Adam wrote. All right. We could also use the future tense. Okay.
Before you go any further, can you do the feminine part of that third person masculine?
We will get to that in another week. I just want to illustrate that these differences exist right now. And yes, we will go through them in more detail. All right. But just to show you, if I was to say Adam will write, okay, so I'm just changing the tense, all right, because Adam remains the same. Okay, he's still third person, masculine, and singular, but I'm just changing the tense. I'm going from past tense to future tense. So from Adam wrote to Adam will write. Okay? The way that's done is like this. Okay, Adam yichtov. Okay? Now you don't need to memorize this just yet. I'm just using it for illustration. You notice that this has the same root, kaf, tav, beit. We've added a yod to the beginning, though. And that's one of our indicators, that's one of the features of conjugation, is that vowels and letters can be added to the root in order to convey the specific meaning we want to get across. Okay? So the third person, masculine, singular, future tense adds this yod at the beginning. Okay?
A lot of places they use the vav, right?
The vav can be inserted.
It's functioning the same way.
Yes, yes, yeah. You'll see various letters that are added: hays, vavs, yods, nuns, alepphs.
Or will.
Right. Yes. So anyway, when we get later on, we'll see entire conjugation charts. So it'll be separated by grids. You'll have masculine and feminine of the third person, second person, first person, singular and plural, future tense, past tense, so on and so forth. It's a giant grid. Okay, but the good thing is, though, if you take any root and you want to change it to whatever function you need, you just follow the rules on the grid. Yeah, and just fit it to your pattern, because we can do the same thing with other roots. So, for example, let's say how about, okay, malach, or just mem lamed kaf. Now we know this is melech, okay, the noun, which means a king. But as a verb, this means to rule. Okay, mem lamed kaf means to rule. All right, so if we wish to say that Adam ruled, we would follow the same pattern. Third person, masculine, singular, past tense. We would add the same vowels, malach, to mean he ruled. And so we can then say Adam malach. Okay, Adam ruled. If Adam were, say, a king.
So, the root that we see in the Strong's or any place or in the dictionary is the verb.
Yes.
And is the root
Yeah. Yeah, the verbs are all built off of these three-letter roots, okay? And yes, if we wish to make them, if we wish to change the person, change the tense, change the gender, change the number, we'll add vowels and we'll add letters in certain places in order to do that. And there's a whole scheme of rules surrounding that. This is why verbs is saved for the advanced class, because there's a lot to it, a whole lot to it. And a lot of it's memorization, a lot of it's memorizing charts. In my case, a lot of it is referring to charts that you've already written down instead of memorizing them. So, but anyway, but just to illustrate though, just this one little point. If we wish to say Adam will rule, follows the same pattern. We've got the yod, okay, with the chirik, the shva under the first letter of the root, the cholam after the second letter of the root. Okay, yimloch, Adam will rule. Okay,
Say that again?
yimloch. Okay, so using the same, using two different roots, we just follow the same pattern. We add the same vowels and the same other letters to those roots. Okay, and it changes the person, the gender, the number, and the tense in the exact same way.
Question.
Yes.
Out of the Hebrew alphabet, can all of the alphabet be used as part of a root?
Yes. Any letter can be part of a root. Okay, and then now this is where things get really complicated. Not now, but in a later class. Things get really complicated is the rules about how to change these can be affected by which Hebrew letters are used. So there's certain rules about if, say, the second letter of the root is a vav, you do things a little differently. If the first letter of the root is a nun, you do things a little differently. So there's all these categories and subcategories, and it gets real complicated real fast.
So it comes back to the base, and the base is a three-letter root.
Right.
And those three letters, wherever they are in the word, carry significance, depending on where they are in a word.
Yes, they will affect how you will conjugate the verbs later. So, as far as affecting what the word means as a root, that's a whole other field of study, which is breaking down the. But yes, as far as the roots can be manipulated in very predictable ways to get the exact meaning that you wish. Okay. So anyway, just an introduction to the idea of conjugation, that you'll do the same thing, you'll apply the same pattern to different roots to yield to yield similar results. Okay. So he wrote, he ruled, okay, yichtov, he will write, yimloch, he will rule. You'll add the same combinations of letters and vowels to the root to get the same result. And yes, it'll change for feminine. So if I was to say that Rachel will rule, I would use a different word. I'd use the same root, but I would have to shift this around so that it's a feminine noun or a feminine verb rather, instead of a masculine one. Okay. Just like adjectives, the verb has to accommodate the subject. Okay? So that's just an introduction to the idea of roots and of verb conjugation. Okay, and I am going to cover one specific kind of conjugation today, the easiest kind. It's easy because it only has 4 iterations.
The will wrote. So you got yod with the Siri. Kaf.
Yes, kaf. It's with a shva underneath it.
Shva.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Tav with the cholam.
Yes, with a cholam, and then your last. Yeah, and when I write these in a pattern, you'll see the way I would write the pattern for the past tense form is I would write first letter of the root, second letter of the root, third letter of the root, okay? And then I would put a kametz here and a patach here. So then, if you have a root, you just plug in first, second, third letters of the root into these positions, add the requisite vowels, and you've got your new word. So, and next to this, you'll see that this is third person, masculine, singular, past tense. It actually won't be written next. It'll be in a grid form, so you can just kind of track everything down. But
now, is that like a standard? Those placements there always end into the pre-PMS? Well, third person.
Yeah. Now, one thing worth noting about the third person, masculine, singular, past tense is in the Strong's Concordance, they list things by root, but they always write vowels with them. And this gets people thrown off a lot of times because they'll find those vowels there and they'll think that that's always how that word's pronounced. The vowels that they add in the Strong's Concordance to the root are the vowels for the third person, masculine, singular, past tense. Okay. In the scriptures, you will find all sorts of combinations of vowels and letters, and that's because the verbs will be conjugated as necessary to fit the context, to fit the subjects that they're going along with. So, if a verse is prophetic, it's not going to be written in the past tense. It's going to be written in the future tense. Okay, that's why the future tense exists, is to speak about things in the future. So, anyway, yes, in a dictionary they won't have vowels attached, but in a Strong's Concordance they do attach these vowels. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just so that. Well, yeah, I'm not sure why, but they do. But be it known that what they're getting at is the root. And for some reason, they attach the vowels that correspond to the third person, masculine, singular, past tense. But that's not the only way that verb will be conjugated. Not by a long shot. So, but anyway, so.
Tense, that colon, was it colon bob or was it defective?
The cholam was just by itself. The future tense of the same thing. Okay.
I thought it was, but I was looking at the chart down here.
Right.
Getting confused.
Yeah, the future tense would be, okay, the third person, masculine, singular, future tense. This is be the pattern for that. Okay. And again, in the future, we'll be covering the past tense and future tense and getting into, all the different combinations. Second person, masculine, singular, second person, masculine, plural, second person, feminine, plural, so on and so forth. Okay. But anyway, so yes, this 1, 2, 3 are the first, second, and third letters. We call them radicals. Okay, radical equals letter of the root. Okay, so first, second, and third radicals. You just plug in those root letters into this pattern, and then you've got your transformation into the verb you want it to be. Okay. Okay, so the one we're actually going to be learning today is called, this is a verb conjugation into a form that is properly known as the active, now I say participle, but I've heard people say participle. I don't know where the emphasis actually goes because I am not an English professor. So please excuse me if I mispronounce this word. I know I'm spelling it right. So, yeah, I don't know. I've heard people say participle. I've always said participle. Okay, well, I'll take it as a 2 to nothing majority then. I'm going to say participle, and just excuse me if I'm wrong. So, the active participle, this equates approximately to the present tense. Okay. This verb form can be used as the present tense. It's not technically the present tense, but it can function that way. So I'm not going to get into all the particulars, but I just want us to be able to actually use some of these verbs. Okay? So, when we're conjugating a verb into the active participle form, there are four possible ways that it can be transformed. Okay? So the masculine singular form, okay, person doesn't matter in this. You can use the same form whether it's being used for the first person, the second person, or the third person. Okay, so person you can eliminate entirely. So you only need to worry about gender and number. And I don't know if you can see this real well on the camera because it's kind of small, but it is in the notes as well. So, but anyway, the masculine form looks like this, masculine singular form. So we've got our first radical, followed by a vav with a cholam, second radical with a tzera, and then our third radical. So in the case of our root katav, which means to write, our masculine singular active participle, or present tense, is kotev. And this equates to is writing. Okay? So if we wish to say that, again, our subject Adam, if we wish to say Adam is writing, Adam kotev. Okay? Adam is writing. Okay? And again, we use this form because the subject is masculine and singular. And we can also use this, again, with the active participle. It doesn't matter if it's first person, second person, or third person. So if I wish to say I am writing, I can say ani kotev. Or I can say ata kotev, you are writing, if I were speaking to one man. Okay? So as long as the subject is masculine and singular, we can use our masculine singular active participle, which roughly equates to the present tense. Again, this is I am writing, and you. Again, ata is our masculine singular pronoun. Are writing. Okay? So that's kotev. I did not leave myself enough room here, so I'm going to expand this a bit. Okay, how about the feminine singular? Feminine singular. First radical. Vav with a cholam. Second radical with a segol now instead of a tzera. This line is getting in my way now. Never good at predicting how large I need to make these things. I think after several hundred I'd have the hang of it. But... All right. Third radical. Again with the segol. And now we put a tav at the end. O-e-e. T. Okay? Yes. Now this is the feminine singular. So, for our new subject, Rachel, or in Hebrew, Rachel, For anyone named Rachel out there, that's your Hebrew name, Rachel, which means a sheep, by the way, which isn't a bad thing. Okay, Rachel, and again using our katav, or
He found her tending the sheep.
probably no coincidence. Okay, using our root meaning to write. Got our kaf, vav with cholam, tav, segol, beit, segol, and our tav at the end. So Rachel kotevet. Rachel kotevet. And that would mean Rachel is writing. Okay? So if I were a woman, I would say ani kotevet, I am writing. And speaking to a woman, I would say at, again the feminine singular second person pronoun, which means you, at kotevet, you are writing. Okay? So that's masculine singular, kotev, feminine singular, kotevet. Okay? The masculine plural, again, we've got our vav cholam in our second position. We've got a shva under the second radical now. And now we add im. Okay? So using our to write root, this would become kotvim. And we might say haim kotvim, they are writing, masculine, or atem kotvim, you, group of men, are writing, or anachnu kotvim, we, group of men, are writing. Okay, masculine plural. Okay, kotvim.
So, if I was looking at kotvim, not knowing what kotvim is, but I know the alphabet, and I would be reading like that in order to get to the root.
Yes.
Since I know to pull out the holon and the yod and the meme,
Right.
there is nothing to let me know what to pull out if I didn't know that.
Only knowing the patterns will give you a hint. Once you know the conjugation patterns, you'll start seeing this. And I don't even know them all, but I know enough of them that when I see something, and even if I don't know exactly what pattern it's following, I can usually pick out the root. Now, there are some patterns in which one of these radical letters disappears. And those are a little confusing because you don't know which letter to sub back in and where it goes in sometimes. But for the most part, once you know some of these patterns, you can look at a word like this and you can say, okay, I know this em ending is the masculine plural. Okay, and I know this vav here is part of a conjugation. So then you're left with three letters that indicate your root. So yeah, a lot of times you can trace words back that way. But the greatest utility, though, is actually building them up to what you want them to be. Of course, though, when you're interpreting Scripture, you've got to go back to the root to figure out what the word means. Okay? Now, so the masculine plural is kotvim. You can probably already predict, then, what the feminine plural is going to be. Kotavot, indeed. And we add ot. Okay? So we would say hain, they, feminine, kotvot, are writing. Or aten, you, group of women, are writing. or anachnu if we were a group of women. Kotvot are writing. Okay? So kotev, kotevet, kotvim, kotvot. All right? And as I mentioned before, you can take another root and do the exact same thing with it, follow the exact same pattern, and arrive at the exact same sense. So, let's take a root about ayin beit dalet. Okay? This root means to serve. And in fact, one of the words on our vocabulary this week comes from that root. It's a noun, but eved, okay, eved means a servant. So that makes some sense. The word for servant comes from the root to serve. Okay? As a verb, we can plug it in to this active participle conjugation, which roughly equates to the present tense, to come up with is serving. Okay? So for the masculine singular, loved. Yes, indeed, like Ovadia, the prophet, Obadiah. Yes, that's what his name means, servant of Yah. Yes, so oved, feminine, okay, is serving. Okay, that's how this active participle works, is just make it in this is doing whatever the root is form. Okay. Oved, okay, if a woman is serving, ovedet. If men are serving, ovdim. And if women are serving, ovdot. Okay? Oved, ovedet, ovdim, ovdot. Okay, so that is the active participle, which you can use as the present tense.
Question.
Yes.
Before you erase that, is work in Hebrew the same as serve when you write it?
Yes, you will see this translated as labor or work sometimes, in addition to serve. So eved can also mean a laborer, not necessarily a servant, that lives with you per se, but someone who labors for you. It can also mean slave. Avodah means service or labor. Okay, and so the priests do avodah, they do service, and some of what the priests do is very physical, like slaughtering animals and butchering and setting up the tent and that kind of thing. But some of their service isn't physical stuff. It's things like reading the Torah to the people, and some of it's not necessarily. It's hands-on in that they're involved, but it's not manual labor per se. So this kind of has both connotations. It could be actual physical labor, or just the idea that you are functioning as a servant. But yes, work is another possibility. There's another word for work, though, too. So there's little nuances to some of the words. Okay? So yes, that's the active participle. And just to give one fun little sentence. Okay, so again, returning to our subject, Adam. If Adam were writing Hebrew, we could say Adam Kotev. Yes, and actually, what we would write is Be'ivrit. Adam is writing in Hebrew. Okay? So if you write this down and you substitute your name right here, or a transliteration of your name here, then you're doing exactly what you're writing. And in fact, you're writing a correct Hebrew sentence as you're doing it. So,
Read that again.
Adam kotev ba'ivrit.
So, Dov is Dalet. And that's Dalet. Discover.
So bait is in, and
Yeah.
the I'm on it.
Right.
On is Ivrit.
Yes, Ivrit is the Hebrew language. I think that's on the advanced vocabulary list for this week. So yes, and this bait is the preposition, the prepositional prefix, which means in or with. Okay, so you're writing with Hebrew or in Hebrew.
Would Dov be Dalet, colon Vav, Vet?
Yes.
That means bear.
And actually, you'll probably see it written defectively more than in the full form. So without the vav more than with the vav, but I think either way would be correct. Okay.
So, is it correct to say Ani Kato Ivrit?
Yes, you could say ani kotev, be'ivrit.
I have to put the bay in there.
Yes, you do need to put the bait there, because you're not writing the Hebrew language.
Hey.
You're writing in the Hebrew language. So yes, that is a difference. Now, for you, you would say ani kotevet, since you are feminine. Okay, but I would say ani kotev. So yes, women, you would write kotevet because you are feminine and singular. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yes, so additionally, Rachel kotevet be'ivrit. Okay, or Sarah kotevet be'ivrit. Okay. And one other thing I'll point out, because I gave a verb before, and I actually gave you the active participle form of that verb. Okay, you might be wondering why it doesn't follow this pattern. The verb I gave you before was ba. And I said that ba means is coming. Okay? Now you'll notice that ba looks absolutely nothing like kotev, and yet it is still the active participle. All right, and I'm not going to go through the entire thing with this, but the reason that is, and we'll find this as we move along in conjugation, is the root of ba is a three-letter root. Okay, it's a two-letter word, but it comes from a three-letter root, which is beit, vav, aleph. And so, just an overview, anytime we've got a root in which the second radical is a vav, it's going to follow different conjugation patterns than roots where the second radical is not a vav. Okay? And so, in this case, in the case of ba, in the masculine singular, that vav drops, and we've got a comets vowel. Okay, so that follows a different pattern where, in our first section there, it looks like this. The vav's the second radical, it's totally gone, so we've got a box with a 1, a comets vowel, and then our 3. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the entire thing of that, but I just want you to know that ba word that we had before is in fact the active participle, okay, but it's following a special rule for roots that have a vav as their second radical. Yes, as we go along, we will cover those instances. I'm not going to go into extensive detail on that because that would take every single week we've got, but I'm going to give charts that have the whole thing on there. And if you understand the concept, you can follow the charts. So, but anyway, just to let you know, because someone might think of that, hey, I remember that ba being a verb, but it is in fact the active participle. It's just following a pattern that applies to the vav being the second radical. Okay?
Now, when you say you're going to give charts, is that when you're bring charts to class as handouts?
Yes. Yes. Yes, and they will be online as well. Hopefully, actually, I'm hoping I can find some good charts online somewhere so I don't have to type them all up because they're quite involved. But some are easier to follow than others, and I kind of happen to like the method I have of doing it. So, and I haven't seen that duplicated in many books. So, not to say that the way the books do it is wrong at all. I learn it better from the way I do it. Okay, so that is the active participle. Okay, which again corresponds approximately to the present tense. All right. So the second subject that I wish to cover today is called the construct state. And as with most things in language, this is a fancy way of saying adding the word of. Okay? So, when we have two words that are connected by the word of, and again the word of is invisible in Hebrew, the first word of that phrase is said to be in the construct state. So, for example, if we were to have the phrase, the King of Israel. Okay? King is Melech. Right? Of is invisible in Hebrew. We have no word for of. So if we wish to say King of Israel, we simply say Melech Yisrael. Now, when we do that, we're now forming a compound phrase. Okay, a phrase composed of two words. And this first word is said to be in the construct state. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because sometimes things happen to the word that's in the construct state. Okay? Now, in the phrase King of Israel, that doesn't happen. There's no transformation that occurs with this. Sometimes in texts, you'll see phrases that are connected like this have sort of this dash-looking mark showing you the words are connected to each other. Sometimes not. Anyway, if you do see that dash, that's what it means. It's just connecting words that are part of a compound phrase. However, a lot of times, or sometimes I should say, a word that's in the construct state will undergo some changes. And these changes are actually helpful because they indicate that it's in the construct state. So if you're not sure where to put an of in a sentence, these vowel changes are a giveaway that it needs to go right after that word. Okay, now Melech Yisrael, no change, no problem. But there are a couple words, there are a number of words that undergo these changes, but there are two that I really want to focus in on. And the first one is bayit, which means house. Okay. When bayit is put in the construct state, these vowels combine, basically, and the new form is bait. So the patach, chirik disappear and are replaced with a tsera. Still means house, it's still the same word, but now it's in the construct state. So anytime you have a phrase, house of, insert word here, it'll be called bait, whatever you have. Okay, so Bethel, okay, the place that Jacob named, means house of God. It's not Bayit El, but it is Beit El. Okay,
Just that.
right, because it's the bait is in the construct state. It's the first part of the phrase, X of Y. Okay, so it undergoes this vowel change. That's why when I introduce the word buy it, everybody says, don't you mean bait? And I say, no, I mean buy it. Because when it's not in the construct state, if you're just speaking of a house, you say buy it. But if it's the house of something, it's bait. And most of the time in the scriptures, it doesn't just speak of a house. It's house of prayer, house of God, Beit Lechem, house of bread, or Bethlehem. Okay. Most of the time you see the word house, house of Israel, house of Judah, these sorts of things. It's in the construct state, so it's pronounced bait. Okay?
So Beit Lechem in the house of Bethlehem in Scripture?
Beit Lechem means house of bread, and that's transliterated into English as Bethlehem. But when you see Beit Lechem, it doesn't just mean, the phrase takes on a definition of its own. It doesn't just mean a house with bread in it. It's referring to the city of Bethlehem. Okay. So similarly with Beit El, it's referring to the spot. It's referring to the house of God, or the city that's named house of God. Okay. So buy it to bait is one. And the other one that I want to point out is this is not a vowel. Well, it is a vowel change, but it's always a vowel contraction. It always goes from a longer vowel to a shorter vowel. So in the case of Bain, which means son, when this is put in the construct state, the tsera shortens to form a segul. Okay, it goes from a, which is a long vowel, to which is a short vowel. So Bain becomes Ben. And again, this is one that every time I introduce Bain, they say, well, can you say Ben? I say, well, yes, but in the construct state. Okay, just a son on his own is Bain. But if we wish to say, suppose the phrase in Ezekiel, son of man. Okay, it's repeated in Ezekiel time and time again, and again it's repeated in the New Testament. Okay, that phrase is Ben Adam.
It's not son of man.
It's in fact son of mankind.
Son of Adam.
Yes, or son of Adam even.
Ben Ish.
Right, son of a man would be Ben Ish, but that's kind of, you're not saying much by saying you're the son of a man. Everybody's the son of a man except for Adam. But yes, the phrase Ben Adam, it's not Bain Adam because Bain is in the construct state. Since we've got this connection of Bain goes in the construct state and the vowel shortens to a segul. If you were to say son of God, Ben Elohim would be the same thing. Instead of Bain Elohim, Ben Elohim. Okay?
Good thing they shortened that. I'd run out of breath saying Bain.
Yeah, I mean that's... Yeah, it shortens probably because some of the emphasis falls on the second word.
Is it actually shorter? What's the same?
The vowel is it changes from a long vowel to a short vowel. A is a long vowel and is a short vowel. And so aye changes to a. Okay. So right. So anyway, all that to say the vowels will change and they'll always go to a more contracted form than they were in before. Okay. So I do need to wrap up, but are there any questions before I do? And actually, there's one more subject. I'll just cover that first part of next week on the construct state. Okay. So.
You said it shortens though. By it into bait.
Right.
That's shorter in length.
It went from two vowels to one, so it combined the two vowels. So yes, it does. It is a contraction, even though a in bait is a long vowel, strictly speaking. It went from two short vowels to one long vowel. Right, but yes, it just it's almost like slurring the word.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, we'll catch you all next week for Advanced Hebrew Week 2. Shalom.